Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. I'm one of your co-hosts. I am Casey. Join with me, as always, is the Sam to the Casey in this podcast. Sam.
Hey, how you doing, Casey?
I'm doing awesome. I'm very excited. We are recording our first episode of spooky season, officially spooky season, here in October, and we're here with a very special interview. He is he's no stranger to having a conversation with you and I. We had him on our old podcast talking about his work on Superhost. We are joined by director, co-writer Brandon Christensen of the latest Shudder original film, The Puppetman, coming to Shudder October 13th. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you again. It's nice to be back. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk about this.
Yeah, we're very excited to talk about this. We got a little teaser when we had Curtis David Harder talking about Influencer. He dropped just, hey, you guys are going to love this movie. And I mean, he was not wrong about this movie. And so, first of all, congratulations on the film. I mean, for us as people who are trying to break into film in our own way, it's a miracle a movie gets made. So, first of all, congratulations on the film.
Thank you. Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, it is always, no matter, this was my fourth, and it never gets easier. You just sort of gain some more confidence so you can actually pull it off every time. So, yeah, it's a thing for sure.
For sure.
So I'm going to go back to that confidence thing in just a minute, but before we get to that, what can you tell people about The Puppetman? Like you said, this is your fourth feature film. What can you tell people about, what this movie is about and what people might be expecting?
This one's a little bit different. I mean, if you are familiar with my work before, I've done a lot of stuff where I'm kind of haunting moms, or Superhost that I did was a little bit of a departure for me because it was more, leaned into comedy a little bit more. But this one definitely just goes, pretty much straight horror all the way through. And one of the biggest influences for me on the film was Final Destination, and just coming up with kind of creative ways to kill people based on who they are. And so that was one of the big things of this that excited me about the project. The other thing was that this wasn't my idea to start with. So usually it's, I'm kind of coming up with the genesis of the idea. And this one, I was actually approached by one of the producers, and he had the idea, like just kind of like a log line situation where it's like, oh, it's called The Puppetman. It's about, a man comes home from work and kills his wife and he can't control himself. And it was like, are you interested in working on this? And my brother and I were just kind of like, sure, yeah, let's take a look. And we just sort of we went down this rabbit hole and just found ourselves really kind of fascinated by the college campus atmosphere, and like just killing people horrifically. That was a big sell for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought up Final Destination. Like my phone right now. So I used to have a little phone stand. I have to make a makeshift phone stand right now, and it's literally propped up on my VHS tapes of the first two Final Destination movies. Like, I love that franchise so much.
Right.
And
So
about
good.
halfway through, like, I looked at Casey, I'm like, this is giving me Final Destination vibes. Like, I love this. This is so cool.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, that was definitely the target. I think Final Destination is different usually because, I mean, they're generally, there's like a Rube Goldberg effect with the kills where it's like, oh, the gymnast on the balance beam. And it's just like, as an audience, you're wondering how it's going to happen. But in this, it's just like, we're going to take something and we're just going to make it really nasty. And, it has that same kind of like unseen force that's causing, total chaos.
Yeah, you build a lot of dread with it because you kind of like you're right. It's different in Final Destination than Final Destination in the fact that it feels like you're kind of telegraphing from the beginning, like you're dropping all these hints about like how they might go.
Right.
And then especially when the scenes come, it's like, oh no, oh God.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that. That's awesome, man.
I'm gonna go back to something Brandon said right away at the beginning. Is when you're making your movies, you gain confidence in every movie that you get to work on, and you always feel like you're learning something new every time you go out there. And that was one of the first things I noticed in The Puppetman was, oh, this is a very different movie than Z or Superhost. And I felt the confidence on screen from yourself and with you as a director of this is a much bigger cast than most of those movies. You have a, much bigger scope and scale. Can you tell us what it was like working with a pretty big cast and working with something that is very different than obviously Superhost was a more of a pandemic shot film, but what was it
Right.
like to kind of build that confidence and build yourself as a filmmaker?
Yeah, I mean it was interesting just because the three previous movies, they all took place basically in one location, so you'd have some days off on another, at another place, but in general you would be in, this house type location for 75% of the shoot or something like that. So when that happens, if you shoot a scene and you're not 100% confident, you're going to be back there. So you're kind of like, okay, let's just real quick, let's pick up this one shot I know we need. With this one, there was something like 47 scenes, different locations, and in 20 days it was our schedule. So you're basically like never in the same location for very long at all. So a lot of the times you're like in location one, and then you're across campus, and you're on location two, and you're never returning to these places. The only real like recurring one was the dorm room that we built, and that was in a studio. So we were in there for like 3 days, and that was at the very end of the shoot. So we were you're just kind of, I mean, it's different just in the fact that like going into each scene that you don't really have the opportunity to come back, because if you're dressing a location like the police like precinct near the end of the film, that was just like this Ukrainian dance hall that we converted into a police department, and like there was no way we could go back there and like redress, put up police, all this, like all the set deck and stuff like that. Like it would be so expensive. So you really just have to be sure that when you go into these places, you have the scene, and so that was definitely different. But I mean, that also comes with other bonuses and like positives, where you can find new places to put the camera and stuff like that. You're not limited to just like this one thing. The story's going to feel bigger, and the scope's going to feel larger because you're able to kind of play in these different spaces. um but yeah, I mean, this is definitely, not even just locations, but just like sort of what happens in a lot of the locations. That was definitely a challenge, just because I mean, even just like a scene with them all meeting on the quad at the beginning, we're kind of meeting all the characters and just getting a little bit of an intro to them. But I mean, you have, probably 25 extras, and you've got five main talent that are kind of all talking, and it's not a very hard scene in theory, but you'd really just have to make sure you're getting the pieces and doing all that stuff. And I'd never really had, I've never shot a movie with five different people talking at the same time. So, um, yeah, it was like, that in the liquor store scene, you're just like, okay, well, you really have to watch everything and really have to
Mhm.
block it out properly, because if you don't, and I didn't on a lot of this stuff, you get to the editing room and you're just like, oh man, like you're really you're left with not the options that you wish you had. Um, but yeah, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing. You're putting the camera in a place and you're filming the movie that you see in your head. So, um, yeah, I mean, just going back to the confidence thing, it's not even confidence in myself, because you're always going to be doubting yourself, always. It's more just, can I act like I'm confident so the people around me can believe me and go on this journey with me, because if they don't, I mean, they can smell it immediately if you're just like waffling on a decision, or you're not sure of something. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't collaborate or anything like that. Like that's huge. A lot of great stuff always comes up from like, oh, that's interesting, and it's like, oh yes, let's shift this scene because of that, and that's a great idea. That happens all the time. But in general, you need to be like the commander of the ship and just lead these people, because the moment that they don't trust you anymore, I think that you lose their attention, and then the quality of everything across the board suffers. So yeah, when I say confidence, it's more just like, I know that it can be done. So you just have to sort of just brute force your way through it, and just
Mhm.
when you have those meltdowns, try and hide them as best as you can.
Absolutely. This is also a little bit different than Superhost in the fact that, like you said, this is very much less comedy driven. You have things like the liquor store in there that are funny moments,
Sure.
but overall this is not a comedic film. Was
Right.
there anything in particular that made you decide for a follow-up to Superhost being like, no, this one I'm just gonna go straight for the jugular?
I mean, the first two films I'd done, Stillborn and Z, they were definitely just like atmospheric, tonally
Yep.
dark with, pockets of humor. This one, I think Final Destination again is a lot. Those characters and everything, they have so much personality and they're so likable and everything like that. So that's kind of the goal that you're going for. So I mean, it's also a tough thing because as much of like a slow burn as this film kind of is, once whatever happens on the rooftop happens, like that's 25 minutes into the film, the tone of the movie is going to change completely. So you really have like 25 minutes for levity because
Mhm.
you're going to establish who these friends are, what their relationship dynamics are, all these things, and you're trying to trying to keep them talking like teenagers and have some sort of likability or whatever. But once that minute 25 hits and whatever happens that takes you to the second act, um, there's really not a lot of places to be happy, like it's
Mhm.
everything's
Right.
just downhill from that point
Yeah.
for everybody. So you're just trying to like, yeah, like the liquor store, things like that. You really just want to have these moments that pop that when you're watching it, you kind of feel good a little bit because you're going to feel really bad soon. And so and so are the characters. So you're just like, you're trying to, there's not much of a balance to strike because once stuff goes bad, like a lot of movies, you can just like someone dies 5 minutes later, no one really thinks about it anymore. And that was one thing that we were trying to avoid. And so we had the scene with the mother coming in and all that stuff into the dorm room and talking about it. And it's just to be like, hey, this is serious. Like someone's dead. Like it's not just we're not just gonna glaze over this. And like I've done that before. In Z, there's the husband dies. It's really kind of just glossed over. And so we really just wanted to make it like, okay, look, this person's dead. We want to mourn this for a second and like really take stock in these characters and who's left and, figure out the chess pieces that are remaining before you go into the next bit. So I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's fun to just dabble in either. I like the super seriousness of some of this stuff, but when you
Yeah.
do get a bunch of kids all joking around and making, whatever, there's a lot of just energy that you get from that and, unpredictability because you just point a camera at 5 people and they're going to do
Mhm.
something, something's going to pop up and you're just like, oh, I didn't expect that. So
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, it's just a tough balance to strike sometimes because, uh, in a film like this, when things start going bad, they just go really, really bad.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, I mean, congrats on the cast of like on your casting, all that. They had excellent chemistry. Like
Yeah.
Mhm.
everything in those first 25 minutes where you're building all of those characters is awesome.
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's
Yeah.
great.
Thanks.
Mhm.
It was cool because it was just kind of like a slow process. Angel, the girl that plays Charlie, she was friends with Allison, who plays Michael, the lead.
Mm,
And so she, my Allison was like, "Yo, you should audition my friend Angel. We've worked together before. She's great." And so I did, and she was great. And it was just kind of like slowly adding these people. But one thing that we did was I started like a iMessages group message for all of us, just so we could all just sort of connect well in advance. Like, I mean, when you cast something like this, a lot of them don't get cast until right up to the date. Like Cameron and
mm.
Keo, they came on maybe 5, 6 days before we started
Oh.
shooting.
Oh
So you're
wow.
just like, get into this chat. Everybody, let's do FaceTimes daily. Let's just talk. Let's just like meet each other all the time. So that because they all flew from LA together. So by the time they got on that plane, they had already been very familiar with each
Mhm.
other. And
Nice.
yeah, and even to this day, like we still have the same group chat going and we talk daily. It's pretty
Mhm.
sweet. So I got really lucky with them.
That's awesome.
You can feel that realism come through the screen, especially in those first 20 minutes. Because, like you said, like after that, it's oh no, like these characters are they're not different, but how they're interacting with each other is different because their
Right.
lives aren't the same as they were the night previously in
Totally.
terms of the
Mhm.
story. So that definitely comes through, and I think that adds to the realism in this movie. And then when things start to get pretty crazy in this movie,
Hmm.
and people out there listening, the movie gets pretty crazy, it
Mhm.
adds to the characters because like you're already set up in this very realistic world because of the characters, and
Right.
things start to get very weird very quickly, and I think that adds for us as an audience something to latch onto.
For sure. Cool. I
Yeah.
appreciate
Yeah.
that. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
awesome.
One thing I want to talk about though is some of the other influences on this movie, because obviously, like we recognize the Final Destination. I could also feel some. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's some certain imagery in this movie. There's a almost like a satanic panic vibe, from those like 70s 80s movies that deal with that. Was that some sort of influence on you when going into the movie, or was that something of how can I spin this, the concept of these college students and having this happen to them? How can I add a little twist to that, my own little spin on it?
Yeah, no, it was it's interesting. I mean, I think that when people watch this stuff, they're going to see things that remind them of something, you know. A big one for me that isn't even horror was the girl with the dragon tattoo, just because of the snow, you
Oh,
know.
Mm-hmm.
yep.
So,
Yeah.
I could see
um
that.
yeah, a lot of the temp music I used with that before, you know, really kind of dialing it in with Blitz Berlin. But yeah, just I mean, I feel like snow in horror is such a cool thing, but it's
Yep.
hard. And having done it, it is very hard because I mean, the entire movie was supposed to be just like snow. You know, there was that, you know, record snowstorm that happened in Buffalo last December or whatever. So, I mean, but that's where we shot it, by the way, Buffalo, New York. But at the beginning of the shoot, there was tons of snow, and by the end, it was basically all gone. So, like, there's a scene on a bridge, and there's a scene with like a busy street. Both of those scenes were supposed to be totally snowy, and we had like snow machines that we were going to supplement it with. But when we shot on the bridge, which was day 5 of the shoot, um, the snow just disappeared completely, just started pouring, and so we were shooting it, and it was just like we can't do both, so we had to just go with the, you know, so the entire last act of the
Mm-hmm.
film is basically all rainy, where it starts off just like
Mm-hmm.
super snowy. No one cares. It doesn't matter. But um, yeah, just the aesthetics of snow and just like the coldness and the isolation that you can kind of feel walking alone in the snow or whatever like that. It is just such a cool thing that I feel like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo tackled a lot. Like just that whole, you know, where he goes to that really rich house. I can't remember the details too
Mm-hmm.
much, but it just has this cold melancholy feel that was kind of what we were trying to hit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, I'm such a sucker for that. Over like when the Blitz Berlin score's playing over the opening credits, and you've
Right.
just got all these establishing shots of the
Mm-hmm.
snowy campus.
Yeah,
The vibes are just immaculate in that, man.
totally.
I
Yep.
love it.
And we shot that before production. So me and the DP went out the day before shooting, and just like that, the night, because we were, you know, living in a hotel together. So we just drove over, and it was just like storming like crazy snow, you know, insane. And we're like, oh, this is such a cool aesthetic. But by like day 4, that was that was gone. So you're just like trying to hold on to that as much as possible. And I actually had to do some pickup shots last December, and that big snowfall happened, and I was just like, okay, I got to wait a little bit to let this clear. So I went back just to get some inserts, like an exterior of the prison, the exterior of the restaurant that they go to all the time, the diner. And when I went back there, and it was like 2 weeks after that snowfall, all the snow was gone again. So I couldn't shoot the ground at all when I was shooting these things. So I flew across the country, you know, go to do this thing, and I'm just like, I can't shoot the ground. I have to fake it, you know. So it's just like, man, what a waste. But
Oh,
yeah, it's a very, you know, snow is tough because it's so unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
well, I applaud it because it's cool. It's
Yeah,
cool where it
it
is.
is
So
cool.
yeah, I love it.
And it's always something that adds to the film. It always adds, like you said, the dreariness, the dread
Mhm.
of what's to come. And yeah, you can feel that, especially on a college campus. You're always supposed to be
Mhm.
happy and you're hanging out with your friends and
Right,
you're meeting new people, but it's like, oh, there's snow on the ground and I have to
right.
walk through that. And
Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
that just adds to normal life dread. And then you add on top of that what happens in the movie. Yeah.
For sure.
I
Yeah.
mean, we're no stranger to terrible snow in South
Oh no,
Dakota.
yeah.
So
Seasonal
Where are you guys?
depression is
we're
we're
in
out in
South
South
Dakota.
Dakota.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm in
So yeah.
Calgary, Alberta now. I moved there last year, so
Oh
um,
nice.
yeah, we got a lot of snow last year. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm definitely
Yeah.
used to it now.
Yep.
Yeah. You also mentioned the Blitz Berlin score, which I definitely noted as we were watching. I love the eerie like choral effects to it. How much
Totally.
input did you have with that, and what was it like working with your composers on that?
So this was the third movie they've done with me. They did Stillborn, Superhost, and this, and it was just one of the, you know, like they're involved early on. We're always talking about it, and like I sent them that intro, the walking, the campus shots with all the snow and stuff. I'm like, this is sort of the vibe we're going for. And so they had sort of this idea. And typically what they'll do is they'll do like it's called a sketchbook. So they'll just come up with different sounds. It's like a painter or something like that. They just sort of are creating their palette, and they're coming up with the sounds that they want. And so they had like 5 or 6 songs that they put together, and it was all really cool. The end credits uses some of it, but they, I didn't expect them to, but they totally just went, they were like, we just had an epiphany. And they sent me that like with the vocal haunt, it was what it was called. It was like, and it had this like Tim Burton, Danny Elfman kind of creepiness vibe to it that was so cold, and it played into the atmosphere so much that I was just like, I totally got goosebumps. I had zero say in any of it. I was just, they just sent it. I heard it and I was like, holy shit. Like this, what that did was it inspired so many moments. Like when I was doing a lot of the temp with like the bridge scene and the city street scene, it was very intense and like horror driven and stuff like that. And then when I laid that on top of it, I was just like, oh, that's totally like, we're in her head. We're doing all these things. She's in this weird possession state. It was just really kind of cool and unlocked sort of like the entire, sonic tone of the movie, which was really cool. But those guys are awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like your own blank canvas? What does it look like when, in terms of like, you said you want to come up with these really insane, awesome kill sequences. Like what does that look like for you, especially for this movie? You have a blank page, you have a blank idea. Where do you start with? Like, how do you come up with all those ideas for the film?
I think once we realized, like, because we didn't have a college or anything like at the very beginning, it was just like man kills wife. That was basically it. And so we just sort of like went through the process of just like, okay, well, there's a girl and it's her dad that did this thing at the beginning, and this is years later, and you're just like, okay, well, maybe she's listening to a podcast about her dad, and that's how we bridge those two stories. And then you start going through, you're like, okay, well, what's the friend group look like? And you start to pull apart like the tropes. You've got the jock, you've got the bookish nerd, you've got the kind of like the she's not like a stoner or anything, but you have Charlie, who's like a little nutty and cool, and
She's
she's
the
like in the
wild
conspiracy.
card.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've got the straight character like the Danny and the Michael, who are just sort of playing, the straight guy and the final girl type. And so you've got those, and then you're like, okay, cool. So what, we've got to kill these people horribly. So how? And then the first one obviously is like, okay, you've got a jock. You're going to do something with working out, and so that was the first one that came up. It's just like, okay, like I've never seen it before. And so I was just, I was really into that one. That was the first one that I was just like, okay, that, 100% that's going to happen.
And you guys went there with that one. It was great.
Nice, thanks. And then Charlie, hers was the next one, and it was just, kind of figuring out where that would be, and you're just trying to like piece together where they're going to go. The hardest one was was Joe with the library, because we're just like, what, the smoking bit that came later, because it was just like, okay, she's in a library. What, paper cuts? What do you do here? I don't know. So once we figured out that she was like a chain smoker, we were like, okay, we have an idea here. So yeah, I mean, it's just sort of like taking these things that they do. You're like, okay, she's in the library a lot. She studies a lot, so the library makes sense for her to die there. She smokes a lot, so the cigarette has to kill her. And then Cameron or Glenn with the weights, you're just like, okay, he works out. We have to establish that. We have to show he's like trying to get bigger. He's trying to get better to be on this team. And then Charlie, hers is just sort of like a wrong place, wrong time. So she doesn't really have one connected to her as much. It's just sort of an emotional outburst from Michael that leads to it. So yeah, you're just trying to figure it out. And then Danny, I mean, there wasn't much there. It was just like, well, he's the friend with the car, like that's why he's there, so he can drive them around. So that was kind of like, we had to get him into a position where he had to do that. And yeah, so it's just, it had to be in the car, because that was like, unfortunately, he doesn't have a ton to do outside of just being like the love interest. It's like, he's the dude with the car. So yeah, it's really just like figuring out what they are, who they are, and then turning that against them.
And I think that's the thing people are going to walk away from this is everyone's going to have like, that's my favorite kill in the movie. Because I think even you and I, Sam, we haven't talked about this yet, but my favorite sequence is in the library. And I know yours is the gym sequence, and both of those are cut, at the same time in the movie. And again, it's an emotional, but also like, oh my God, this is happening type of moment when that happens. What was it like cutting this two scenes together? Did you think of like doing them separately at different parts of the movie, or was it always like these have to be at the same time?
Yeah, so it was the first cut of the film and the script, they were not together. They happened back to back, so it was like Glenn, all of his stuff happened all the way to his death, and then it went to Joe, and it did it all the way into her death. And so the first cut had that, and it was just like too long and too, you knew immediately that Joe was going to die because Glenn just died. So it was just like one of those natural things where it's like, we got to come together. The problem was because we did that, I mean, the script didn't have like a big thing for Joe. Like there was nothing with the book or anything like that. Like she goes to the library, she opens it up, she looks at it, makes the phone call, and then she dies. And so if you watch it again, like notice how little you see her mouth moving and talking, like all of her dialogue, like talking to Ruby on the phone, that's all ADR because there was nothing. Like we didn't, the scene was not, it wasn't supposed to be what it ended up being. And so like all these inserts of the cigarette falling, all these like these tension building things, they were all just like cut together as much as we could, just kind of rebuilding the scene to make her the starting point, and then going to Glenn, because she's kind of like leading the expedition of like, I'm finding stuff, I'm discovering, and the thing doesn't want to be discovered, so it kind of just like rolls into her, and then Glenn's pulled in, and it all kind of coalesces together. So it made all the sense in the world to do it that way. But on the page, it kind of made sense to just have them separate because they're just like one scene. But yeah, had I known, I definitely would have shot it a little bit differently, just to properly set things up, because that caught me by surprise, and it was the very last thing to lock, like on the edit, because it just wasn't. It just needed those extra pieces that I had to kind of figure out, and that took a little bit.
Yeah, well, it paid off because that's like, I mean, to me, that's like the centerpiece of the movie.
Right.
It's
totally.
it's so crazy. Yeah,
for sure.
And I mean, there are some gnarly practical effects in this thing too. Without giving away like how things happen. Can you talk us through the process of like how those practical effects came? Like, what's the process for doing the things you do to the human body in this?
So there really isn't that much practical effects in this film. It was
really,
there was like, Charlie, she was supposed to have a fake leg when she was on the ground, and broken leg, classic like It Follows type deal. And we didn't have it, so it was just kind of like I filmed her laying there from this higher position and just like had her rotate her body and like move her legs weird so I could kind of reposition her and do that. But with the two that matter the most, Glenn and Joe, so we shot in the library at Buff State for Joe, and they had a very hard, like, you couldn't be there past whatever time it was, 9:00. Once that happened, the whole building shuts down. Nothing we can do. There's no like, you can't ask for more time, whatever. It's just that's all we have. So me and the makeup artist Eric, we came up with a plan where it was like, it's going to be faster to start with all of the makeup on, like the most deteriorated version of her, and then clean it off and shoot it in phases and like go back to where she's clean, because it's easier to clean than it is to build.
Yeah.
So we could have her kind of in makeup as we're shooting other stuff, and then when we get to the library, she's ready. I think just unfortunately they didn't expect the prosthetics and everything on her face to be that much, like to take that long. So they did a ton of stuff to her. It looked amazing. But ultimately we'd shoot for 30 seconds because we get like 2 shots, like really close to her face, a little bit side on her face, and then we got to get the next stage. And then what happened was the next stage takes longer than you expect. So you shoot it again, and you're like, okay, we're running low on time. So by the time she was clean and we had to shoot her coming in and making the phone call and looking through the book and all that stuff, we literally had like 15-20 minutes left. So we had like one take of all the phone call from each angle. There was just no time to shoot it, and we ended up doing more in the studio in the last week anyways, where she got even further degraded in makeup and stuff like that. So if I could go back in time, I would redo it and just not shoot the makeup in the library, like really focus on the tension building stuff. Cause that's the scene, you know, the fire, once her head's on fire, it's like 2 seconds, you know, it doesn't take that long. And so we didn't have to shoot that much coverage of it. It was all the other stuff that we didn't have enough of. So, what we ended up doing too, which was cool, is the producers, they built this like chicken wire torso, top half of a torso. And when we were in the studio, we got like this book, and we had like a ton of kerosene and a lot of lighters, and we just lit this book on fire and like put the head in it, and we were filming it just to have reference plates and stuff like that. So the fire, that when her head is engulfed, that's practical fire on this chicken wire thing. And it's just, we just shot it at the same angles that we shot the footage. So it just really it was very easy to do. It was pretty sweet because it all matched up. You just like put it there and, you know, use the right blend mode with the footage. And it just sort of like, oh, perfect. Like I was worried going into the film. I was like, how is this fire stuff going to work? But it was one of the easier VFX shots we did.
That's awesome.
And then Glenn with his, like the tooth thing, that was all done in post. I just hand painted out the tooth, and the eye, the same thing, that was added in post. And then the shot, the final shot of him before we cut away, it was actually pretty simple. It was because we were supposed to have like a fake jaw built and all this stuff, but when you don't have a lot of money, it's hard to do that stuff like really well. Like if you have like the Rick Bakers of the world and they're doing all this stuff for you, it's different. But when you're just like an indie thing, you don't have the resources to, you know, you need a team to work on this one gag, and you've got a bunch of gags, so they've got to be, you know, they're really spread thin. So it was like during the table read in pre-production, a couple days before production, I had this long chat with him. I was just like, don't worry about that one, I'll do it in post. And so what we did was, is this a video podcast? Like, will this be seen, or is it just audio?
Video podcast too.
Okay, cool. So they'll have reference too. So how we did it was we locked the camera down. I'm going to be Glenn. And I had him like facing up, and I had his mouth open, and then I just rolled him like choking, like, ah, ah, ah. And then I had him turn his head to the camera, and then I had him do it again and go like, ah, ah, ah. And then I split the head so it looks like his head's been twisted. And so it's just like 2 shots on top of each other, where if you look, it's just like one is, or his chin is up and his head is turned towards us more. And then his hand was a separate shot too, all from the same shot. We just rolled 3 different, and his hand was just on the bar and just sort of slides off. So again, super simple. Just, I just had to sort of figure it out. And my big thing with that scene was, I was just like, I don't want to see like a close up of this bar dropping on the face. Like I kept saying I wanted the American History X curb stomp moment. So, you know, like when you watch that movie, that's such a horrifying scene. But when he actually steps on his thing, you have so much tension built up from those close-ups of his teeth on the curb. You don't actually see anything. You know, it's like such a wide shot when he stomps, but you have seen it. You know, you're dreading it so much that you just know that it's about to happen. And so when it does, like I cut to a big wide, it drops. Physics are whatever they are. I don't know. They're not 100%. But and then it's the close up that we see, and it's out of focus. Like you don't really see what's happening. It's just, you know, it's there, but the hand is in focus, and the hand is kind of like, it's Puppetman's letting go of him, whatever. But yeah, that was definitely like the inspiration of that whole sequence, where it's just like, I don't want to get into this thing that could look kind of schlocky or whatever. I wanted it to be classy gore, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I get that. It's like it's like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where everybody thinks that film is like way more gory than it really is. Yeah. That's awesome, dude. You pulled one over on me with that.
yeah. Watch it again. There's really not. I mean, I'm trying to think of practical things. Like even Danny in the car, there's nothing practical there. All the blood was added in post.
Oh my gosh.
There he had a little bit on his nose, and then for his final bit, they had like a tube running that just ran down, but. Like there's so much supplemental blood. All the cops, it's all fake.
Dang.
Yeah, there wasn't much real blood on it. So it's just, you know, figuring that out.
And you know, horror fans are always a stickler for practical effects. And you're watching this, and like again, we had the question of how did you do those?
Right.
And to hear that, I mean, it's seamless. It blends perfectly. And again, you leave a lot up to our imagination.
Right.
Like for me, during the weightlifting scene, it's it's the tooth moment where I'm like, oh
Right.
my god, that's the disgusting thing here.
Yeah, for sure. It's so small because his head's gonna get smushed. But that part's just because I mean you think about it and it's like you like
And
how hard are you?
we've all felt that before.
Yeah.
We've all
Yeah.
lost a tooth.
Right. Well, what was that movie? It's I think it's Kevin Bacon. Is it Stir of Echoes,
Yeah.
or
Mhm.
whatever it is? It's been so long since I've seen it. But there's like a kidnapping at the beginning, and someone like they get pulled and their chin hits the floor and teeth go, and it's just awful. And it's
Yep.
just terrible. And that's I mean any teeth stuff. I don't know why they're so just like little bones, but man, it's just so
Yeah.
gross.
Yep.
Yep. Oh
All right.
man.
I'm gonna wrap things up here with one more question.
Sure.
And I'm gonna throw a little twist on it though. We have the Puppetman coming out October 13th. Obviously, it's spooky season. You can't just watch one horror movie when you watch a movie on a Friday or Saturday night. What movie would you pair as the writer director of the Puppetman? What movie would you follow this one up with? And you cannot say a Final Destination movie. That's my little twist on it. Yeah.
Is it like a new movie or any movie?
Any
Any
movie you
movie.
would recommend alongside this?
Damn.
It can be a new movie though, if you want it to.
Yeah. I mean, I would have said Final Destination just because that's such the obvious pairing.
Yeah.
But
Couldn't make it easy on you.
I know for sure. Damn it! It's there's always these questions that you get thrown, and it's like one that you should have probably thought of before. But you know, like I had one question that was like, which horror movie would you want to live in, or something like that? And it's a bit, and like you don't have to be a main character; you could just be in the world. And I think I said Hereditary because those houses were really nice. So it's like if you're a neighbor off. It's great, you know.
Yeah, you're fine.
Great.
That cult's not going to deal with you.
Yeah, or you're in the cult. You're fine. You're protected.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the problem with this film is it's so dark and like it just it doesn't make you feel good at all. So you need something to pair with it that is a feel good movie, something like Deadstream. Where
Yeah.
that it's the complete opposite. It's like a palate cleanser. So I'll say Deadstream. It's another Shudder film.
Yeah.
Much more fun and just like I think you watch Puppetman first, and then you watch that, so you go to bed with a little bit of eye bleach, and you feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great pairing. Great pairing.
Yeah, that'll work.
I love that gross out horror comedy is the palate cleanser for us.
Well, I mean, if you want to go straight comedy, then you can do that. But I'm sticking with the spooky stuff.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, one more
Awesome.
time, October 13th on Shudder, the Puppetman drops. Do you have any final words to people out there listening on what they can expect for this movie and where they can also follow you and your work online?
you can follow me on Instagram. I'm just the Brandon Christensen, all one word. I mean, this movie's gonna be it's being put out on an awesome day, Friday the 13th in October. But it's also coming out on the same day as Mike Flanagan's new show on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's coming out on the same day as John Carpenter's return to directing, and there's a show that he's doing on Peacock or something. It's also coming out on the same day as Creepshow. It's also coming out on the same day as Taylor Swift, her concert. And so, I mean, I'm going to be very curious just to see. There's such a spread, and so it's, like on the 13th, if you watch it on Shudder, I'm sure that they'll appreciate it. But I know there's going to be so much competition for people's eyes. So, and it's all good stuff. I mean, Flanagan is Flanagan. He's like the goat. So, I'll be watching Usher that day for sure. But yeah, watch Puppetman. It's just it's pretty quick. It's an hour 36, and it's just it's got some really cool kills, stuff that you've probably never seen before, and it's just it's not trying to be anything more than it is. It's just a fun time with friends and killing off those friends.
So if you need a palate cleanser from Taylor Swift, pop on the Puppetman right after.
Right, for sure. I need that.
Yeah.
Why is she doing October 13th? That makes no sense.
I made one post about it on I made one post about it on Facebook, and all the Swifties came after me. So I'm like, I'm gonna shut my mouth about this for the rest of my life.
It's so strange. I don't know her music that much. I couldn't tell you a song, but the popularity of Taylor Swift right now is crazy.
It
It's like
is
Michael
crazy, yeah.
Jackson in his prime. And
Yeah.
I don't know her music well enough to judge that side. It feels so strange, and I'm sure she's amazing or whatever. I've heard her shows are amazing, but it's really weird.
Yeah.
Friday the 13th. Come on, leave that for the horror people.
I
Right?
assume just like Alice Cooper, she has Jason Voorhees chase her on stage too. That's all I can assume. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah. I don't know. She's got to do something. But shoot, what was I gonna say? Oh, the funny thing was that the Exorcist movie, they moved the release date up because of it, because they didn't want to
Yeah.
compete. And she's like, she outsold Spider-Man in ticket pre-sales.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it's crazy.
It's insane.
Good for her.
Yeah.
She's crushing it.
Yeah.
The Exorcist moved because they didn't want to compete with you. That's really why they moved.
Yeah.
They have no idea I exist. It's that was Taylor Swift 100%.
Yeah. Well, we'll be singing the praises of Puppetman, encouraging everybody to watch that one on the 13th. And
Cool, thank you.
We dig the movie. Congratulations on it, Brandon. And thanks for joining us. Thanks for talking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Brandon Christensen, everyone. Go check out The Puppetman, October 13th on Shudder. Let's wrap this thing up. Sam, thank you all for listening, and we will see you guys next time, and happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.